Today was one of those days in politics where everybody lit their hair on fire over something that happens every single day.
Fox News getting an exclusive look at a letter signed by GOP senators pledging to block the Democratic initiatives until the Senate acts to stop tax hikes.
They have delivered a letter to the Democratic leadership that says all 42 Senate Republicans are in effect prepared to filibuster anything that would be put before those two measures.
They're going to block any other legislation from coming up for vote during this lame duck session.
No DREAM Act, no don't ask, don't tell, no anything else Senate Republicans say until they try to negotiate an agreement on tax cuts.
They vowed to prevent a vote on any legislative item until the tax issue is resolved.
This letter saying that they're going to hold up everything on the Senate floor.
Okay. That is not news. Holding up everything on the Senate floor is news? Are you kidding me? They've been holding up everything on the Senate floor for 4 years now. It would be news if they didn't. But today, it inexplicably became news like it had never happened before. This was amazing. Today, it became the subject of all this hair-on-fire reporting because of a three-page letter. A three-page letter signed by all 42 Senate Republicans delivered to Democratic Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. The letter saying if we don't get our way on tax cuts for income over $250,000 a year, we will filibuster everything in the Senate. In the original legalese from the document, quote, we will not agree to invoke cloture on the motion to proceed to any legislative item. Forgive me, but Republicans have not agreed to invoke cloture on the motion to proceed to any legislative item in 4 years, since 2007. This is not new, and this is not news. Republicans filibustered the stimulus bill. They filibustered all the different parts of the health reform bill. They filibustered Wall Street reform. They filibustered stuff that they have agreed with. They filibustered that food safety bill we talked about on yesterday's show. They are so used to filibustering stuff that they filibustered that one before 15 of them voted for it anyway. They filibuster bills they agree with now. They filibuster bills they disagree with. They filibuster all regular business of the Senate. If there was a resolution tomorrow morning to say, good morning, Mitch McConnell, it's nice to see you, they would filibuster that. Over the last 4 years, since they have been in the minority, since January of 2007, Republicans have employed a blanket filibuster on everything. So their big threat today was they're going to start filibustering stuff. They are threatening to blow up something that is already blown up. We're already living in the rubble of the thing that they blew up because they blew it up 4 years ago. They are threatening to burn down something that is already burned down. They are threatening to kick in the teeth of something that has already had all of its teeth kicked out. This would be like if you now, this year, in 2010, threatened to blow up those giant Buddhas in Afghanistan. Oh, yeah, I remember those giant Buddha statues. Those were awesome. But the Taliban already blew them up. They're gone. The only silver lining to the Taliban blowing those things up is that nobody can threaten to blow them up anymore because they're already gone. If you're the Death Star and you've just blown up Alderaan, you can't then, after that, threaten to blow up Alderaan. It's blown up. You already did it. Republicans have already blown up the Senate. Republicans are threatening to start obstructing things now to not let a majority vote make the decisions anymore in the United States Senate. Are you kidding me? There is nothing left to blow up. Ordinarily, things don't take 60 votes to pass the Senate. Things take 51 votes to pass, a simple majority. The reason that we think everything needs 60 votes to pass now is because 60 votes is what it takes to break a filibuster. And since Republicans filibuster everything, everything takes 60 votes to pass now. So the supermajority that is reserved in our Constitution for extra special, extra weighty stuff like ratifying treaties and impeaching people, that supermajority threshold is now used for every single, hi, how are you, let's name a post office piece of anything that has to go through the United States Senate. Republicans in the minority of that body have essentially just made it so. They unilaterally changed the country quite radically so that this is the way that things go, or rather don't go, through our nation's legislature now. Here's the filibuster in the last 10 Congresses. Maybe you can see a vague pattern there, right? But ballpark, holding steady. That's the last 10 Congresses. Then, boing, That's what happened when the Republicans went into the minority in 2007. We don't yet have the numbers for the 111th Congress, but you get the idea. This is not normal. This is the procedural removal of America's capacity to solve its problems through the legislative process. Republicans have been doing this since 2007. So why is them threatening to do it some more now getting all sorts of news coverage today? It's not a rhetorical question. As best as I can tell, it's because Republicans want it to get lots of attention, and so it's getting lots of attention. Honestly, this is the emptiest threat possible. They are threatening to do something they have already done and have been doing for 4 freaking years now. But now they've written a letter that's apparently aimed at trying to gain some sort of leverage over Democrats. Although you would not necessarily know it by reading the Beltway press, it is actually the Democrats who have the political leverage right now. It's the lame duck Congress. Democrats have huge majorities in both houses of Congress, and they control the White House. Republicans can't pass anything on their own. Democrats have the leverage to be wringing concessions out of Republicans, not the other way around. Republicans, despite their very healthy self-esteem and the Beltway press that loves to fluff that, Republicans don't actually run the place. They are not in any position to dictate terms. And yet that is exactly what they're trying to do right now, with a big assist from the Beltway media. And that's where the big fake empty threat comes in. The whole fight that D.C. is having right now is over what's going to happen to the Bush tax cuts, right? That was the basis for the letter that the Republicans sent today. We will filibuster everything until the tax cuts are dealt with. Even though we already filibuster everything anyway, we melodramatically threaten to filibuster again until we get what we want for rich people's tax cuts. The thing that Republicans want on the tax cuts should theoretically give Democrats even more leverage over them than they already have.
They are willing to risk everything in order to get a bonus round of tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires. They are literally willing to stop everything, risk everything in the economy in order to get an extra tax cut. We don't care if it's paid for. It doesn't matter if it's paid for. It doesn't matter if anything else gets done. It doesn't matter national security. We're not going to take up the START treaty. We don't care about our relationship with Russia. We don't care about national security issues. We want a tax cut for our friends. Millionaires, billionaires, adding $700 billion to the debt. This is not partisanship. This is about common sense and what works. We have had a policy in place that has not worked. So why would we continue it?
It was Democratic Senator Debbie Stabenow of Michigan on the Senate floor today. We'll be speaking with her in just a moment. She was there laying out the case against the Republican stance on the Bush tax cuts right now. $700 billion in tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires that is not to be paid for. We're just going to lard it onto the deficit. That's what the Republicans are drawing this line in the sand about. No tax cuts for the middle class. No, nothing. No START treaty. No funding of the Pentagon. No nothing until the richest Americans get a bonus. Republicans have said they will not blink on that. And Democrats now appear ready to test that resolve. Tomorrow, House Democrats are reportedly planning to hold a vote just on the Democratic tax plan. The Democratic tax plan is a tax cut for all income up to $250,000 a year, but not a tax cut on income above that. It is a vote to extend the tax cuts to 98% of Americans, while letting the tax cuts for the richest 2% of Americans expire. How will Republicans vote on that? Think they're going to vote to raise taxes on everyone as punishment for rich people not getting their own special bonus? Democrats still control both houses of Congress. Republicans can make all of the empty threats they want, but it's up to some people in the media to point out when the threats are empty, and it's up to Democrats to point out that they have the leverage. Joining us now is Democratic Senator Debbie Stabenow of Michigan. Senator Stabenow, thanks very much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, it's good to be back.
There are reports tonight that House Democrats will hold a vote tomorrow on the middle-class tax cuts, letting the tax cuts for income over $250,000 a year expire, effectively calling the Republicans bluff. Do you expect that the Senate might do the same thing?
I do, Rachel. We have every intention of bringing up that vote, putting folks on the line, having to decide. In fact, it was interesting today on the floor of the Senate. A number of us were on the floor throughout the day, and Senator Schumer actually asked a Republican colleague today on the floor after he objected to extending unemployment benefits if they would be willing to accept extending tax cuts for folks up to $1 million, but not beyond. And he wasn't willing to answer that. He was asked that several times. And so it's very clear what this is about. $700 billion not paid for, going on the national debt. A policy, as you pointed out in my comments earlier, that doesn't work, hasn't worked. You know, they've had this policy in place of extra tax cuts for 10 years, and I just want to know, where are the jobs? We've lost over 800,000 jobs in Michigan. If this had worked, I'd be on the floor fighting to continue it. But it hasn't worked.
President Obama has set up a bipartisan group to try to reach some sort of compromise on this issue. I have been hearing a lot of no compromise rhetoric from the other side,
right,
from the Republican side over the last few weeks. Do you think that Republicans will be willing to compromise on this issue? They'll be willing to trade away something on this?
I'll be very surprised. I mean, obviously, the president is reaching out. That's his job, to reach out. He has his position, his principles. He's been very clear about supporting continuing tax cuts for 97% of the American public, and that's been very clear. But he's trying to get some discussion going. I appreciate that. But the bottom line is that we can't afford another $700 billion going on the national debt. Imagine the Deficit Commission coming out with proposals on Social Security and Medicare. Can you imagine what else they'll have to come out with if we add another $700 billion to the national debt? So it's jobs, the debt, Social Security, Medicare, people who are out of work, holding Medicare, or the middle class tax cuts and small business tax cuts hostage. I mean, these guys really will stop everything, risk everything, just to give another average $100,000 tax cut a year from millionaires in this country.
Hearing you make that case here on this show right now, hearing you make that case today on the Senate floor, seeing the visuals, the signs that you put up today and helping you make that case on the Senate floor, it's clear that you are trying to not only make your own case, but essentially to make the Republicans answer for what you see as the political peril in their own position. You are somebody who has had a long career in politics and who understands how these things work in nuts and bolts terms. How do you make the other side pay a political price when they're taking a stance that's against the public polling, that you think is against the national interest, and that really ought to be something that strikes the country as unpopular?
Well, I think it's certainly unpopular in Michigan when folks lay out what the trade-offs are. And I think we have to be willing to say no to holding middle-class tax cuts hostage and help for small businesses. And by the way, Rachel, we have had 16 different tax cuts that we have passed in the last 2 years. They have filibustered every single one of them. 8 of those just a couple of months ago in the small business jobs bill. So we're not going to be lectured by folks about small business. I mean, we're the ones that are out there fighting for small business as well as the middle class. And in my judgment, we have to be willing to draw a line in the sand and be able to say we're not going any farther. And be willing to walk away. If they want to hold the country hostage for $700 billion more in debt with an economic policy that's cost us jobs, I think we need to say no.
On that point, do you think that Democrats would be willing to walk away, to say, listen, these can expire, we can deal with it retroactively at some other time, but if it comes down to holding tax cuts for the middle class hostage to this deficit-busting $700 billion worth of bonuses for the richest people in the country, we're not going to do it? Could Democrats let the tax cuts expire?
Well, I think the majority of us feel that way. And the question is always around the margins in terms of what ultimately happens. But there's a very strong sentiment in our caucus, and people who are very, very concerned both about the debt in this country, about jobs, and about what's happening to middle-class families that are seeing their house underwater and their own economic situation underwater. And the vast majority in our caucus feels very strongly about this.
Democratic Senator Debbie Stabenow of Michigan helping us make some news here tonight in our coverage of this issue. Thanks very much for your time tonight, ma'am. It's nice to see you.
Always good to be with you.
Thanks.